This is part 42 and we intend to discuss provisions regarding accident as a defense. And in order to know what do you mean by accident as a defense, we have to refer to only one section, namely section 80 as far as general exceptions are concerned, which tells us what do you mean by accident as a defense. And then if we start reading section 80, it says accident in doing a lawful act. And then you start reading the section, it says nothing is an offense which is done by accident or misfortune without any criminal intention or knowledge, in doing of a lawful act in a lawful manner by lawful means with proper care and caution. And to begin with, if you refer to the same illustration which is given after section 80 of the Indian Penal Code is concerned, which says A is at work with head checked. The head flies off and kills a man who is standing by. What is his liability if his act results into death? Can it be said that he is liable for an offense? And if at all he is charged for any one of the offenses, he can prove, well, my case falls under section 80, because by this time I hope you have mastered the principle. By general exceptions we mean these are the general defenses, and by general defenses we mean when you read a particular section of the Indian Penal Code which defines an act which amounts to an offense that is subject to exceptions right from section 76 up to 106. And during course of time we have dealt with what do you mean by right of private defense as a right of private defense. We also dealt with act causing slight harm. We dealt with what do you mean by mistake of fact, where we dealt with section 76 and section 79. When the act is done by judge or when it is done by the direction of the judge. And now we proceed to this section. We have started our discussion as far as this section is concerned. A is breaking a log of wood with the help of an axe. And all of a sudden it so happens the head of an axe flies off and strikes somebody on the head, which is at some distance, which results into his death on the spot. The person who was breaking a log of wood is arrested by the police and he is accused of the offense of murder. At the time of the trial he can admit, yes, his breaking of a log of wood, because of which head of an axe had flied off, and which flies off and then resulted into death of somebody, but he can say that, well, I am not liable because my case falls under section 80 of the Indian Penal Code, which says nothing is an offense which is done by accident or misfortune without any criminal intention or knowledge, in doing of a lawful act in lawful manner by lawful means with proper care and caution. When you want to learn this section, as usual, you have to carry out this section of the section and try to remember all ingredients, so it becomes very easy for you to understand as far as section 80, which deals with accident as a defense, is concerned. Imagine a situation where somebody, a branch of the tree is above the road, across the road, and somebody is driving a vehicle. Now, when he is driving a vehicle, when he is about to, he is under the branch of the tree, somebody who was sitting on the branch of a tree all of a sudden jumps down on the road, and by that I mean instead of vehicle dashing against a person, he has dashed against a vehicle which has resulted into his death. What is his liability? Now immediately it must click you, he is not liable because this was because of an accident. This was because of the misfortune. Accident and misfortune are the terms which are nowhere defined as far as law is concerned, but you have to understand the meaning of those terms as it is understood in day-to-day life. You never expected anybody to meet you, and he meets you after 20 years all of a sudden at the place where you never dreamt of it. You say we met by an accident. Yes, very well. Or a thing which takes place in such a manner that the man who jumped, the one who was driving never expected that, and it's because of the misfortune. Or the number of illustrations can be taken into consideration from the point of view of understanding this. A man went to the garden. he wanted to kill a bird which was on the top of the tree. For the time being, for the sake of argument, we say that, well, he had right to kill the bird, and he started, he fired into the direction of the bird. But the bird flew off, and somebody, Mr. B, was on the top of the tree behind the leaves, falls down, which results into his death. Now, pulling of the trigger has resulted into death of the person who was on the top of the tree. What is liability of the person who pulled the trigger? And then he can say, well, though he is pulling of the trigger, as in case of general exceptions, what we do? We admit the act, but we don't admit the liability because of the fact that it falls under any one of the exceptions, and he can say, well, it was because of misfortune of Mr. B. It was also because of an act. What is an accident? Accident is an act which takes place which is never expected on the part of an individual. Then we say it was an accident, as if the meaning is understood in day-to-day life. But that is not, that is not all. It says nothing is an offense which is done by accident or misfortune. Yes, that is one. It was, never expected on the part of somebody. You are driving a vehicle, and all of a sudden, it may be on the, freeway, and then all of a sudden somebody is trying to cross the road, and before, he has dashed against your vehicle in such a manner, you never expected any human being to cross the road in such a manner. And then what is his liability? The liability, he is not at all liable whose act has resulted into death of the person. Because of what? Because the case falls under section 80 of the Indian Penal Code, which deals with what do you mean by accident as a defense. Further part of the story says that there must be absence of criminal intention. There are cases where A wanted to kill Mr. B. He started driving the vehicle and he dashed, deliberately, had dashed Mr. B with his vehicle, which resulted into death of Mr. B. He had intention. So there must be absence of criminal intention or knowledge, and the person who is doing an act, what should be the nature of that? He must be doing a lawful act in a lawful manner by lawful means with proper care and caution. Lawful act does mean which is lawful as per the provisions of the Indian Penal Code. Even if somebody is driving a vehicle without license and somebody jumps from the top of the branch of the tree in front of his vehicle, he is protected as far as section 80 is concerned. Because what is the interpretation of doing of a lawful act is concerned? The lawful means lawful as per the provisions of the Indian Penal Code. Or when somebody takes a gun, in an illustration which I told you, that he went to the garden and fired. He may be having a gun without license also. But then if that was because of an accident or that was because of misfortune, if there was absence of criminal intention or knowledge, then he is protected as far as section 80 of the Indian Penal Code is concerned. So doing of a lawful act, if the person was doing an unlawful act, for example, A has thrust his hand into pocket of Mr. B in order to commit theft with respect to the money purse which he thought he must be carrying. And what happened? Instead of B having money purse in his pocket, he had a revolver. A's hand had fallen on the trigger of the revolver. The bullet went off. The trigger was pulled. The bullet went off and killed him. What is liability of Mr. A? He was doing an unlawful act. And because of the fact that he was doing an unlawful act, he won't be protected as far as section 80 of the Indian Penal Code is concerned. Now, if result is the death, and if he is not protected as far as section 80 of the Indian Penal Code is concerned, his liability for maybe as per any one of the sections, I hope you remember, section 299, which defines culpable homicide, section 300, which defines the offence of culpable homicide amounting to murder and culpable homicide not amounting to murder, and then we proceed to section 300. Here the question of proceeding to section 304B, which deals with dowry, death doesn't arise, but section 304A. And it can be said that he is liable for the offence of death by rash or negligent act as far as section 304A of the Indian Penal Code is concerned. Why? Because he had no criminal intention. He has no, because if you start reading section 299, what it says? Whoever causes death by doing an act with the intention of causing death. There was no intention. Or with the intention of causing such bodily injury as is likely to cause death. there was no, or with the knowledge that he is likely such act, as the case doesn't fall under section 299, the question of proceeding to section 300 of the Indian Penal Code doesn't arise, and hence what we say, in this situation, his liability, if he cannot be protected as per section 80, and hence when we were discussing section 304A of the Indian Penal Code, I told you that we shall again have reference to this section at the time of discussing section 80 of the Indian Penal Code, and this is the right, proper and just time for us to continue our discussion with the same. If A came to know that Mr. B has committed theft with respect to his property, he goes to place of Mr. B and says, give property. B doesn't give back his property. A tries to use the force, and while using a force, he has pushed Mr. B, which results into, say, bodily pain to him. Now, can Mr. A raise the defense that I just wanted to take back my property, I had no intention? No, because now once the property is taken away by Mr. B, the danger to the property, and refer to section 105, there was no right of private defense, and hence the right of private defense of the theft ends where B has already taken away the property, because we have dealt with what, when the right, when the right commences, how long the right continues, and when the right ends accordingly. So this is what he is doing. He may be doing a lawful act by asking a person, give back my property, but means which are used by her, you cannot take law into your own hand, and if you take law into your own hands and try to take away the property, then you cannot be protected as far as section 80 of the Indian Penal Code is concerned. So, person who wants to claim benefit as far as section 80 of the Indian Penal Code is concerned must be doing a lawful act. It must be done in a lawful manner by lawful means with proper care and caution. From my point of view, this can be understood. What is lawful act? Doing of a lawful act in a lawful manner by lawful means. But the most important part as far as this section is concerned is the last ingredient. If it is proved that there was proper care and caution on the part of the person, then only is protected as far as section 80 of the Indian Penal Code is concerned. And to understand this illustration, you have to imagine two situations. One, Mr. A was having a gun, and what he was doing, he wanted to oil the gun, he wanted to clean the gun, and that was the job which he was doing. All of a sudden, Mr. B knocked the door. Mr. A went to the door and came back, which took round about not more than 30 seconds for him, extreme case. And then they were having a discussion, and in the discussion B was inquiring, B was very curious that Mr. A was having a gun, and he was just, there was a dialogue. Is it possible for you to pull the trigger which can result into death of the person? Can you kill a human being? And rest of the discussion was going on. Mr. A jocularly lifted that gun, pointed out gun into B's direction and said, now if I pull the trigger that will result into death, shall I pull the trigger? And he pulled the trigger. And unfortunately bullet went off and he killed Mr. B. What is liability of Mr. A? Now at the time before 30 seconds, when he had left the place from where he went to open the door and came back, he was 100% sure that the gun was unloaded, because of which he was cleaning it, and because of which he wanted to oil the gun, keep it ready. But in the meantime, within this period, some family member had come and had loaded the gun and went back again, not with any intention. Maybe his son might have done that particular act. He wanted to learn. He wanted, to do that particular act. Now, what is liability of Mr. A when his pulling of the trigger results into death of Mr. B is the first situation. And as compared to this situation, let me tell you one more situation. A along with B came to his house. Mr. A's gun was hanging on the wall. Mr. B had inquiry, curious regarding the gun, and he was asking everything regarding the gun. As a result of which Mr. A took the gun, which was hanging on the wall for a number of days or number of months, took out the gun, pointed out gun into direction of Mr. B again jocularly, and said, if I pull the trigger that will result into death, and he pulled the trigger, and which really bullet went off, which resulted into death of Mr. B. In both the situations, pulling of the trigger has resulted into death where A had no intention. He was sorry for the consequences that had taken place. What is his liability? And the answer is, in the first situation, now in both the situation it was because of an accident or misfortune. He, without any criminal intention or knowledge, he was doing a lawful act in a lawful, I mean, by lawful means casually, just, I mean, just he was playing jocularly. He had pointed out gun, so he had no intention. I mean, and hence, I mean, this can be, I mean, you tell somebody, this is a knife with which I can cut you. I mean, as long as you don't cut, you don't intend, merely telling doesn't constitute liability when you casually tell him accordingly without any criminal intention. Yes. So now, yes, mind well, let me tell you. If A tells Mr. B very seriously, this is a real gun, and if I pull the trigger that will result to, and if the gun is pointed out into his direction, he may be liable for the offence of assault, which is defined by section 351 of the Indian Penal Code, with which you are dealt so far. But this is the time where I say both of them knew. I mean, as far as the A state of the mind is concerned, he was, I mean, very sure that this is not going to, I mean, result into death, and Mr. B was also confident regarding the same. But if that results into death, only the liability of Mr. A revolves around the last ingredient. With proper, if there is a proper care and caution on the part of the person. Now, was there proper care and caution on the part of the person as far as the first situation is concerned and the second situation is concerned with respect to the same illustration? In the first illustration, yes, 30 seconds, as I mean, when he had kept the gun over there and he was 100% sure it was not loaded, he was fully confident, if I pull the trigger, that may not result into, I mean, because it is without bullet, it is not at all loaded. But in a case when a gun is hanging to the wall and you take a gun when you are not at all, when you are dealing with a dangerous weapon like gun, before you pull the trigger, it is must for you that you should get yourself satisfied that it is unloaded, and that is what is known as proper care and caution on the part of an individual. If that is not done by him, in the second situation, we say, in the absence of proper care and caution on his part, Mr. A is liable as far as the second situation is concerned, as for the offence of death by rash or negligent act, that is dealt by section 304A of the Indian Penal Code. But in the first situation, he is protected as far as section 80 of the Indian Penal Code is concerned. You start from your residence, you know that your brakes are out of order, but you say that it will be possible for you to control your vehicle with the help of the gear control, and you start with the vehicle, and a situation arises where you cannot stop the vehicle and you dash against somebody. You won't be protected as far, even though, I mean, it was because of a misfortune, you won't be protected because there was no proper care and caution. When brakes are out of order, if you start, I mean, driving the same vehicle, then it cannot be said that you are protected as per section 80 in the absence of proper care and caution on your part. Or you are blowing a horn and you want somebody to give you a side. He doesn't give you a side. You think that he will give side, you proceed. You are not protected because, I mean, there is no proper care and a caution on the part of an individual. And hence that is the liability as far as section 80 of the Indian Penal Code is concerned. Now, mind well, when the result is the death because of accident or misfortune, and the situation because there is absence of criminal intention, mind well, and if the case doesn't fall under section 304A of the Indian Penal Code, in that case, if it doesn't fall under section 80, it will definitely fall under section 304A of the Indian Penal Code. A man, for example, who wanted to, I mean, protect his garden, for which he went to the market, and he had an electric wire of which he had taken a coating and had put current through it, and it was live bare electric wire across the fencing. Thief came during night hours, had caught hold of the fencing, and then he had an electric shock. Now there the person cannot say I am protected as per section 80 of the Indian Penal Code is concerned. I never thought, because that was the plan that was done by you, and hence he is not protected as per section 80. And if that results into his death, the person is liable as per section 304A of the Indian Penal Code. Or as I mean, you go on dealing with n number of illustrations as we were, because this is the section where I mean it's not only by reading that accident as a defense you can understand. You must be in a position to understand the various take into consideration illustrations, and then there's a, I mean, though the person had not used a proper cement for the purpose of construction of the building, and then I mean the building had collapsed. Now that was an accident, no doubt about it. But if that results into death of somebody, the person is not protected as far as section 80 of the Indian Penal Code is concerned, because there was no proper care and caution on the part of an individual. Now what is proper care and caution on the part of an individual entirely depends, which is a relative term, and entirely depends upon the nature of the situation. Now hence the cases where there are cases where if the case doesn't fall under section 80 of the Indian Penal Code, especially when there is no proper care and caution on the part of an individual, that constitutes that will amount to an offence. And then as I told you, if the case doesn't fall under section 80 of the Indian Penal Code, then that will definitely come under, as far as liability which is dealt by section 304A of the Indian Penal Code is concerned. So this is what is meant by accident as a defense, which is dealt as per section 80 of the Indian Penal Code is concerned. This says nothing is an offence which is done by accident. As I told you, accident is an act which is never expected on the part of an individual, and that takes place as you want to kill a wild animal. You are waiting for an opportunity because the wild animal has created havoc as far as that particular village is concerned. You are waiting for a wild animal. You fire into the direction of the wild animal, and all of a sudden it so happened that somebody who was behind the trees wanted to pass by, and that was not known to you, mind well. You were not aware of it. You had no idea that somebody must be there behind the tree in such a forest, and then you fire, which results into death of that person. The person is not, the one who pulls the trigger is not liable, because he is protected as per section 80 of the Indian Penal Code is concerned. There must be absence of criminal intention, there must be absence of criminal knowledge, and if the person is doing a lawful act, if he is doing it in a lawful manner by law, you want to commit a theft with respect to a bird which is in the cage of a balcony of somebody, and then you want to kill a bird and commit theft, you fire, and all of a sudden the man comes out and your bullet hits him. You are not protected, because what you are doing, you are not doing a lawful act. This is required to be understood. You must be doing a lawful act in lawful manner by lawful means with proper care and caution. Such a person is only protected, if at all it is protected as per section 80 of the Indian Penal Code is concerned. We can take into consideration number of illustrations, but if at all it is necessary, we may come back to this section during course of time. But otherwise, for the time being, this serves the purpose from the point of view of understanding as to what do you mean by accident as a defense, which is dealt as per section 80 of the Indian Penal Code is concerned. In the next part, we shall be dealing with absence of criminal intention. And in order to understand absence of criminal intention, I shall club 4 sections together, namely section 81, section 94, section 92 and section 93, with which we will continue our discussion as far as next part is concerned.